Odysseus pushes his story into the furthest reaches of the fabulous as he enters the kingdom of the dead. Book 11 brings us into the Underworld, which is naturally the most bizarre and most furthest extent to which he can travel. That's where his audience would perhaps be most intrigued. Like, ooh, he has been to the land of the dead. Who else has been to the land of the dead? Well, only heroes have been to the land of the dead to return from there and tell us about it. So he is automatically sort of associating themselves with them to his audience, and so it's a little bit of a power play there. But he is in this book, in this chapter, playing to his audience. And the many disparate interests and folds of hostility within that audience, that it's a masterclass in, quite frankly, in diplomacy and reading the room as he can, like really nobody else. It starts off with lines designed to appeal to, well, a seafaring people. Again, what does he know about his audience, the Phaeacians? Well, they're sailors, and they like to sail. We reached the sea at first of all, and we reached the sea, and first of all, we launched the ship into the sparkling salty water, and set up the mast and sails, and brought the sheep on board with us. We were still grieving, weeping in floods of tears, but beautiful, dread Circe, the goddess who can speak in human tongues, sent us a wind to fill our sails. Fair wind befriending us behind the dark blue prow, we made our tackle ship-shape and sat down. The wind and the pilot guided straight our course. The sun set, it was dark in all directions. This is a kind of nautical romanticism designed to appeal to a seafaring people, quite frankly. The maritime spirit of it is really quite extraordinary. But also you see this kind of mysterious overlay in it. The sun had set, it was dark in all directions, and then they land on they reach the limits of the deep flowing ocean. The limits, in other words, nobody has ever gone there before. Where the Cimmerians live and have their city, their land is covered up in mist and cloud, and shining sun god never looks on them with his bright beams. It is mysterious. It's spooky. It is a mystery story. Everybody loves a good mystery story. He knows this, so this is what he's providing. He is spinning out this great and fabulous, almost gothic tale to cultivate the interest and the alliance of his audience, because he needs them to help him get home. And so he goes and he lands on the dead, and they unload the sheep that Circe has told him that he has to sacrifice. They dig a trench and they start sacrificing sheep, and then lo and behold, the dead souls start to approach. And this is kind of a bizarre little moment. And the first person who comes up, is Circe, or not Circe, rather, Elpenor, who is a common sailor, crewman of Odysseus, who died falling off the roof rather unglamorously while drunk, falling off Circe's roof back on her island. And they left, and he was nobody, so they didn't really care. So they just sort of, they didn't even notice he was gone. He was that low on the totem pole. But now he's dead. But because nobody paid attention to him, because nobody recognized him, because nobody gave him the funeral rites that are demanded for souls to be at rest, now he is rather upset, and he's telling them, okay, you got to go back and give my body its proper burial and funeral services and all that, and then everything's going on. But significantly also, there is in his little plea, because it's so prominent, and he's really nobody, but he is the first soul to come up to them. there is in this a kind of a sense of the value of human life, of every human life, which is a curious, almost critical note to be advancing to this room full of aristocrats who are built entirely on the idea of that, well, the little people don't necessarily matter. But you see, when you sail from Hades and you dock your ship again at Aea, please, my lord, remember me. Do not go on and leave me there unburied, abandoned, without tears or lamentation, or you will make the gods enraged at you. Burn me with all my arms and heap a mound beside the gray salt sea, so in my future people will know of me and my misfortune, and fix into the tomb the oar I used to row with my companions while I lived. Which is interesting because again, he's nobody. He's completely beneath Odysseus's certainly realm of concern. But look at the message this is sending. This is dropping the note that, okay, this guy seems unimportant. He's completely beneath our the value of our notice. He can die, and it wouldn't mean anything to us, and we can go about our business. But the message here is that if you do that, the gods will be angry at you. So he is sinking that idea in as well. It's a criticism, you could make the argument, of their aristocratic pretensions, but it is also, I would say, a subtle message that, okay, there are lots of vulnerable people out there, maybe even me, Odysseus, for that matter. But if you treat me well and do me honor, the gods might be favorably disposed to you. Subtle, but I think it's there. And he is also making an argument for traditionalism in this, for the respecting of funeral rites, of the customs appertaining to the dead. So he's a voice of traditionalism, and Odysseus has been throughout, in his own particular ways, a advocate for traditionalism. Now that will play in a very conservative room like he is right now, and so making that argument, pressing that case, and saying, okay, remember, this is what makes us better, that we observe traditions, that we have customs, that we have a cultural heritage that we respect and prosecute in every case. So he is making a subtle criticism of them and how maybe they have swayed from traditionalism, or could sway from traditionalism if they don't respect the rights of custom of their culture, the rights of Xenia and guest friendship and all of that stuff. And again, always the same message: and send Odysseus home, help him get home. And then the next person that comes up, and this is dramatic, and this is significant in a number of ways, and can color how you see him in any number of ways. Odysseus he swears, okay, yeah, all right, well, we'll bury you, we'll do all that. The next soul to approach, in Odysseus's telling, is Odysseus's mother. And here you get this very emotional moment where where his mother comes up, and I would not let her near the blood he had spilled. The souls have to come up and drink the blood of the sacrificed animals in order to, or at least come near it to be able to speak and converse with Odysseus. And he holds her back because the mission is to get Tiresias, the prophet, to come out and speak to them. And he is waiting for that. And nothing is going to dissuade him from that. And on that, you can say, well, okay, that's a kind of honor. He's willing to swallow his own personal emotional needs or curiosities, because he did not know, supposedly, until this moment, that his mother was dead. And so he is justifiably, I think, a little upset and a little concerned, and he wants to go perhaps ask, Mom, you passed away. Oh my gosh, tell me how. He holds her back. No. And there's something really quite powerful in that, in rejecting his mother and rejecting his emotional bond to his mother and saying, no, the higher goal matters more. And that's really quite gripping to anybody who's ever had a mother. That 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 discipline, that coldness, that sense of being torn. We're not brought into his thoughts here. He doesn't tell us, I felt this and I felt that. We don't get that. Rarely get that in Homer. But the drama of that moment is so profound. But it is significant in that it is his mother. And who is in the room? Who is in the audience? He is playing still to Arete, the queen, who he has been told by Nausicaa is the real power center. And, well, Dad, the king, will do whatever she wants. So, make your appeal to her. So here he starts talking about, he couches a story, crafts a story in terms of the mother-son relationship. He knows that Arete is a mother. He knows that Arete is perhaps the most powerful person in the family. So he is making his play on these grounds. And it is dramatic. Of course, the whole curiosity of, well, Elpenor came up and, he didn't hold him back, or Elpenor didn't really need to get too near the blood. It's a little confusing, and you can make, scholars have made this argument that, well, this is an example of some of the fractures in the story, the plot holes, if you will, that show that, well, maybe Homer dropped a stitch or two in pulling all this together. These stories are all kind of a patchwork, so you can find those little moments throughout. But then Tiresias comes out, and the blood and the speaking, and Tiresias starts to lay out, okay, this is what's going to happen. And it's really quite curious in how he puts it. You have to suffer, but you can get home if you control your urges and your men. If you control your urges and men. And he lays out a story, which will be the remaining story of the Odyssey, quite frankly, in this parallel of conditional clauses balancing free will and fate, saying, okay, all this will happen if, and the if is always predicated on self-control. Can you control yourself? Can you control your men and get them to control themselves? Can you exercise a kind of restraint of worldly appetites or emotions or anything like that? That is the goal. Also, you can't help but notice that he does kind of give away the plot. He gives away the plot of a lot of the adventures coming up. And, it's kind of a spoiler alert moment here where, like, well, do you need to know this? And this goes to another tradition of Homeric tragedy or Homeric epic. It's not really a tragedy. It's not really predicated on any idea of suspense. The plot construction is not geared towards that. They're famously Yeah, Auerbach says that there's never any suspense in Homer. The sense of fate tells you everything, but it is about experiencing each moment, not concerned about the future, but experience each moment in itself as it comes along, which is the denial of suspense. Um, but significantly also, he lays out what will be the future. One thing that the poem does not directly address. Um, After he's saying that, well, if you do all this and if you do all that, you will get home to Ithaca and you will come upon the suitors and you will kill them all. You know, that's the big finish. Why are we being told this? Um, and he says, when those men are dead, you have to go away and take an oar to people with no knowledge of the sea, who do not salt their food. They never saw a ship's red prow, nor oars, nor wings of boats. Again, you get that sense of the romanticism of nautical stuff that is going to appeal to everybody in that audience. Oh yeah, boats. I like boats. I prophesy the signs of things to come when you can meet somebody, a traveler who calls the thing you carry on your back a winnowing fan. Then fix that oar in earth and make fine sacrifices to Poseidon, a bull and a stud boar. Then you will go home and offer holy hecatombs to all the deathless gods who live in heaven, each in order. Gentle death will come to you, far from the sea of comfortable old age, your people flourishing, so it will be. Gentle death will come to you. Well, first of all, the traveling far is still people who don't salt their food or recognize what a boat is or an oar is. That's a sense of, you know, really pushing it into the unknown for that audience right there. But also that sense of it's almost an urge for humanity over the role of the hero and the traveler and the wanderer. His traveling, his exploits are all tied up in a kind of hero pose. But here he's saying, or the goal seems to be that Tiresias is laying out for him, is that, you know, put all that aside and just go live to be an old man and die in your bed when you're, you know, peaceful and content and kind of dull, like a human being, not like a hero, not like anything grandiose. Now, on the one hand, this is going to, again, in that audience, allay some fears because Odysseus knows that they know that he might be dangerous. So here he's saying that, well, yeah, I'm Tiresias, the prophet from the dead, said that I am going to go away from the water as opposed to this island where the Phaeacians live, which is in the water essentially. I'm going to go far away from the water. I'm not going to go anywhere near it. I'm not going to bother with any of it or anybody around it anymore. And I will live a peaceful old life, which is what these people want to hear because they don't want to think that they're sending back somebody to their home so that they can then gather a force and then come back and attack them. So again, he's always pressing these points, trying to play to his audience. The Tiresias finishes, he goes back, and then finally the mom comes up, and you get this very touching scene where, again, it's this emotional scene between a mother and a son that is really kind of playing on Queen Arte's presumed sympathies. Uh, the queen tells him about the fate of Penelope at home. They're very concerned about the wife, in other words, is their first real point of concern. And of course, that is playing once again to the wife, Queen Arte's wretched points of interest, or not wretched points, primary points of interest. They talk about his father, his aged father, again, sympathizing with him. There is a kind of there's a kind of outrage in talking about Odysseus's father Laertes, saying that he will not come to town. He does not sleep on a real bed with blankets and fresh sheets. In winter, he sleeps inside by the fire, just laying in the ashes with the slaves. Again, this sense of outrage that this old man is being forced to do that because Odysseus is not home. So, this old great king, King Laertes, is forced to lie with the slaves. And of course, this would seem so improper to that room of aristocrats. So again, playing on the sympathy. The mother says very heartbreakingly that why did I die? Well, it was not sickness or anything like that. No, it was missing you, Odysseus, my sunshine, your sharp mind and your kind heart that took my life from me. Oh, come on. He's really larding it on very quick, very thick there. And that's just a bit much. That interchange goes on for quite a while. They talk, then he goes on about a number of other great figures of Greek culture, both human and mythological, all women. That goes on for a while. We learn about the women and their sons primarily. This is their role. There are essentially two kinds of women laid out in this. There are seductresses and there are mothers, and that's pretty much the extent of their career choices. We get all the mothers, and then we get into the seductresses, the treacherous women, and we get this litany of the dirty dozen or so of Greek terrible seductresses who lead honorable men astray. And again, he's playing on some of the moral outrages that he can anticipate in there, but also in praising women so widely as the mothers at first, suddenly it does segue over to, but not so much. There's almost a sense that as he is addressing all of this stuff to Queen Arete, he's maybe getting a sense that over here on the other side of the room, there's some stiffening and getting impatient among the men. King Alcinous most especially, who is, saying, so, well, now, wait a minute, women can be a real pain in the butt. Women can be quite irrational, quite immoral themselves, and they are very often the problem. So, let's lean on that a little. Let's not spread all the blame among the men. And so he starts playing on that. So you get this sense that it's never said in the text, but you get this sense that he's suddenly moving the story over here, and suddenly women go from being very, very good to very, very treacherous. And it's around that time that the story kind of breaks off. And he says, I cannot name each famous wife and daughter I saw there. Holy night would pass away before I finished. I must go to sleep. This is Odysseus, of course, saying this. On board the ship beside my crew, or else right here. I know the gods and you will help my honored journey. He's been talking for a while now. He's a little tired, understandably. And he says, I could go on as long as my creativity is there, but I'm tired. I really want to go back and go to sleep, and I put my trust in you and the gods, and everything's going to turn out okay for me. And the first person to speak up, the natural leader of this audience, it would seem, then is Queen Arete. They were silent, spellbound, listening in the shadowy hall. White-armed Arete spoke. And then what she says is very significant. Phaeacians, look at him. What a tall, handsome man, and what a mind. He is my my special guest. Sorry to emphasize, but that word is there. My special guest. But all of you share in our ranks as Lord, so do not send him away too fast. And when he leaves, you must be generous. He is in need, and you are rich in treasure through the will of the gods. And this is exactly what Odysseus wants to hear. It's like, okay, yeah, they're going to let me go, and they're going to load me up with cash. He likes that. The veteran Echenius, I can't pronounce, the oldest men in their company said, "Our wise queen has hit the mark, my friends. Do as she says." But first, Alcinous must speak and act. It's like he, the oldest, wisest men of the company, let's say, is sensing that there is this division. Like, okay, yeah, the queen is absolutely right, and we should all do as she says. But first, the king has to say something, and then we will act. It's like the guy who has spent decades in that room, understanding the dynamics of it. He figures out, probably a little bit after what Odysseus figured out, just deducing it all together in the span of a few hours. The king said, "Let it be as she has spoken. She has spoken." There's a little passive aggressive anger going on there. As long as I am ruler of this nation of seafarers, I know our guest is keen to go back home, but let him stay till morning. See, now Arete had just said, yeah, okay, let him go, let him go, let him go. And now the king is going to veto that because he can. Or at least he likes to think he can. The one decision she made. All right, well, she made two decisions. Said, all right, we will help them, and he should go to bed right now. And he's saying, all right, we'll help him. That's prudent. But no going to bed right now. I will give his presence then. You men will help him, but I will help the most, since I hold power here. That is sharp. Yikes, that is sharp. That is pushing back on, my wife is a very powerful woman, but I am the boss. I wear the pants in this family. This is a sense of power structure pushing back, and Odysseus takes note. Odysseus answered with careful tact. He's very tactful. He knows how to play one side against the other. Alcinous is king over all the people. If you urged me to stay here for a year before you gave the parting gifts and sent me on my way, I would be happy. I don't think he would be that happy. He doesn't want to spend a year. He wants to get out of there. It would be far better to reach my own dear home with hands filled full of treasure. So automatically he's recalculating and saying, all right, I have to stay here and talk for another few hours, but I'm going to get something from it. I can maybe use this to press my case, because now I've achieved my primary goal, which is they're going to let me go home, but now I can move the ball a little further down the field and get more money for it. So then Alcinous chimes in and says, okay, Odysseus, you caught your breath for a second there. How about we have some more stories? But come now, tell me if you saw any spirits of your friends who went with you to Troy and undertook the grief and pain of war. He wants war stories now. We've heard an awful lot about women from Odysseus, and like, well, geez, all of this, and yeah, sure, the underworld seems to be loaded with women, but are there any soldiers there? Are there any real manly men there? What can we expect? Maybe tell us some guy stuff. We don't want the chick flicks. We want guy stuff now. So Odysseus digs in and says, okay, you want that? I can do that. Sure. He's there to sing for his supper. And sure enough, he starts talking about how, well, who can he bring out? Well, okay, one of the one of the most prominent members of the Trojan expedition, if it were, on the Greek side was Agamemnon. And so the shade of Agamemnon suddenly approaches, and he's talking about that. And of course, Agamemnon's biggest complaint is his wife, the treachery of his wife, Clytemnestra. He is more focused on Clytemnestra and Clytemnestra's role in his death than we heard earlier. Homer was particularly concerned with it, because in that telling, it seemed to be all more on her lover, but now he is really leaning in on his wife, saying, my wife did it. And, suddenly you're getting this story about marital hostility and discord and how you can never trust a woman. And who is this playing to now? The pendulum is swung just a little bit. The spotlight is over here on the king, and so this is where Odysseus is playing to. There is no more disgusting act than when a man betrays a wife, or than a wife betrays a man. No more disgusting act than when a wife betrays a man. But Odysseus knows who he's talking to at this point. And then he talks going on about other concerns about his son Orestes, and he's concerned about him. Have you heard any news about my son? Again, sort of not forgetting, like, okay, over here I've got Queen Arete still concerned about the mother-son thing and children. So let's not forget that. But still, it's got to have that masculine edge. So I'm talking over here to him. So I've got to keep those both plugged up. And plus, again, the star power, the bold-faced name of Agamemnon is going to have everybody in the room sort of leaning in and saying, wow, yeah, because this is not Elpenor now. He's not telling the story of Elpenor. He's telling a story about the big marquee name of the Trojan War. So everybody is sort of leaning in at this point, and he is playing them like a very, very well orchestrated symphony. Both of us wept profusely and deeply grieving. Then came the spirits of Achilles and Patroclus and of Antilochus and Ajax. Again, more A-teamers. All of this shameless name dropping is bringing all of the audience along with him. And he talks about Achilles comes up to him, and Achilles strikes an interesting character, because Achilles is the great hero of the Iliad, and where Odysseus is really kind of the second banana in that. And you get the sense that Achilles is the great warrior, and Odysseus is the strategist, but maybe he kind of likes the glory of wanting to be the great warrior. So maybe there's a little jealousy there. Maybe there's a little hostility. But this is his chance to sort of bury Achilles just a little bit, because Achilles comes up to him and he's all mad about being dead, supposedly. He says, I would prefer to be a workman hired in a poor field on a peasant farm than rule as the king of all the dead. Which is a fascinating little tale, because for one thing, it's a great sense of character. Like, what is the value of human life? I would rather be a workman. And again, to that audience of aristocrats, he is saying that, I would much rather, there is a little bit of a critique there that, well, who would rather be a workman than a king? Well, that doesn't make sense. So maybe he's pushing back on that just a little bit. But it's all framed again within this contrast between war and peace. Achilles is saying that I would rather be I would rather be just an ordinary person in a time of peace, to be alive, than to be a hero in a hero in death. That sense of wartime versus peacetime again, and that contrast that is going to become so much more of a thread of this poem as it goes on. But also, the fact that Achilles dies in battle is something that maybe Odysseus has some issues with, and he's never going to be able to live that down. And of course, in his story, he has Tiresias saying, "Yeah, you're going to go on. You're going to die in your bed as an old man." Well, that's not a glorious hero's death. Achilles died a glorious hero's death, and maybe this is Odysseus's way of sort of getting one over on him by saying, "Okay, I'm going to tell this story where you actually regret the fact that you died a hero's death, because I have to be superior to you, and that's because of that I am going to have you devalue your own death in battle." It's he's playing to all of these characters, but he's also satisfying his own ego in there as well. He's not just going to toss away this opportunity to correct the record as far as he would like it to reflect. Achilles is concerned for his own son. Um, More of a concern for Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, and again you get the sense of, all right, I'm hitting the big guys, the Arnold Schwarzenegger and types for the men, but I'm going to keep the female concerns in there too. The child-parent relationship is going to figure very heavily in my story of these great warrior heroes. The Ajax comes up, another great hero, and he is almost like too enraged he's too enraged to speak. It was always it's always been his temperament, that was his problem, and he was always just too furious all the time. And here you get an appeal from Odysseus, who's trying to coax his former comrade to speak to him, saying, "Please, Ajax, son of mighty Telamon, can you not set aside your rage at me about those cursed arms?" Because there was a bit of a competition or whatever or resentment over the proprietorship of Achilles' armor. It's a big subplot in the Iliad. And he's pressing this point of, can't you put your rage aside? Blame nobody but Zeus. He ruined us in hatred for the army of Greeks, and that was why he brought this doom to you. But listen now, my lord, subdue your anger. Subdue your anger. Use reason. Restrain your emotions. And in the process, accept your inferiority to me, because of the proprietorship of Ajax feels like Odysseus gypped him out of the armor of Achilles and the great honor that goes with it. So there's a sense of that theme coming out as well. The restraint again. And remember, that was the advice of Tiresias to Odysseus, saying, if you can restrain yourself, if you can hold in your emotions and use your reason without letting your anger or your pride or your hubris get the best of you, if you can hold that in, control yourself, then everything will be okay. And from there, Ajax really kind of blows him off, but you get this sudden cavalcade of more spirits coming up, all the great figures of mythology, and Odysseus is really just tossing in a hodgepodge of heroes and monsters and kings and gods, and it's all just a greatest hits album of Greek mythology, because he's trying to end with a bang. He's trying to whip up this great episode to wow his audience. This is the most fantastical place he could take his audience to, and so he's trying to make the very best of it, and he is nailing it again and again and again in very specific, strategic ways to make his point about sending him